I receive a great deal of questions regarding members that were once with another family than the one they ended up in, as well as questions if a member can switch families, which during my time, this was not a practice, nor have I ever heard of it. There are guys who could be with one family and end up in a totally different family. And there's a few reasons why this takes place. It's common practice for an associate of one family to either be released or traded to another family. As far as a family releasing a guy, this usually takes place by request, where one family requests that the other family release the person. Sometimes it's a relative or a friend of the person who will make the request. You also have guys who are traded. For example, give us this guy and we'll release this guy to you, like any other trade. In some instances, a guy is released to protect him. And in extreme circumstances, a family could also chase a guy, and then another family takes him in, and he now becomes an associate of that family. And then you have what's called poaching, which can play a big part in how an associate winds up with another family. In a nutshell, he's stolen. In the case of the old Gallo crew, they were basically remnants from the Gallo-Profaci War. And rather than keep members of the opposition, members of the Gallo crew were permitted to be released to other families. To name a few, Albert Gallo went with the West Side, as did Ponchi Iliano. Bobby Borriello went with the Gambinos. Vic Amuso went with the Lucchese's, and in his situation, he would wind up becoming the boss of the family. So you have a lot of old Gallo crew members that dispersed into different families. Roy DeMeo was at one time a Lucchese associate and became a Gambino member. Members of his old crew, like Joey and Patty Testa, Anthony Senna, and Carlo Profeta, were all released to the Lucchese family. Well, actually, years ago, the Gambinos came looking for Carlo Profeta. They were trying to get in touch with him, but they were told that he had just been straightened out by the Lucchese's, which they weren't too happy about. So Carlo Profeta was actually poached. Anthony Guzzo is another case of poaching, which I can admittedly say that I'm somewhat guilty of, although it was the Lucchese family that actually poached him. He was an associate of the Colombos, and now he's with the Lucchese's. We were actually looking to take his brother Vito as well, but the Colombos inducted him in the prison bathroom. Kevin Granado was a Colombo associate who the Gambinos straightened out, and I remember back then, the Lucchese's were complaining that the Gambinos poached Granado from them, and I have no idea why, since Granado was around Greg Scarpa's crew. Spanky Castelli was also with the Colombos and is now with the Lucchese's. The same goes for John Bodanza, who was with the Colombos and now is also with the Lucchese's. He married Danny Catea's daughter, and Danny at the time was a Lucchese captain. Joey Scopo Jr. was with the Colombos and is now a Gambino. Joe Cafe was a Gambino associate who was traded to the Lucchese's. And I don't know who the Lucchese's gave up in the trade, but one day Blaze Carrazzo told me we got the shitty end of that deal, and quickly added that he was only kidding. But you know what they say about things said in jest. Nicky Scarfo Jr. was a former Philadelphia associate, one that was shot at Dante and Luigi's restaurant in South Philly on Halloween night of 1989. As a result, Vic did his father a favor and had Nicky Jr. inducted into the Lucchese family. And I highly doubt that Vic gave Philadelphia any respect by asking for his release. So Nicky Jr. would be considered poached. Al Capone was originally from Brooklyn and with Frankie Yale, who released him to Johnny Torrio. And Capone would go on to become the boss in Chicago. Anthony Gaspipe Casso had family ties to the West Side and was considered an associate, but wound up with the Lucchese family and became the underboss. In similar fashion, Stevie Crea was around the West Side as well, and like Gaspipe, became a Lucchese underboss. Johnny Sideburns was around Patty Mack with the West Side and was pulled over to the Lucchese's by Joe Caridi. And Joe Caridi was originally with the Bonanno family and ended up in the Lucchese family and at one time became the Consigliere. Simone Esposito was associated to the De Cavalcanti family but became a member of the Bonannos and was also at one time a Consigliere. John Donadio was a Lucchese associate who was released to the Gambino family. What's interesting is, despite the fact that the East Harlem Purple Gang was not considered a mafia family, many of its members and associates were related to members of various families. And just to name a few of those members and associates who would eventually move on to become members of families themselves. Angelo Prisco became a member of the West Side. Thomas D'Ambrosio went with the Lucchese family, as did Frankie Salerno, and Fat Gigi Inglisi, and Johnny Echoes Campopiano, as did Matty Madonna, who would become the Lucchese acting boss. Danny Leo went with the West Side and also became an acting boss. Mikey Nose Mancuso went with the Bananos and became the boss of that family. Ernie Boy Abamonte went with the Gambinos, as did Alphonse Fonzie Siska. In rare instances, some associates become associated to two families, which will always come to a head. For example, there's a guy named Michael Rita who was an associate of the West Side. He became friendly with Matty Madonna, and Matty foolishly believed that he was going to straighten Rita out and put him in the acting boss position while he went and did time on the gambling case. Let me quickly remind everyone to like this video and mention the super thanks icon found down beneath for anyone who'd like to show appreciation or support for this podcast. So the West Side gets wind of Matty's plans and quickly puts him in his place and reinforces the fact that Rita is unequivocally with them, and they stop Matty's madness. As for Rita's sin of displaying due loyalty, the West Side put him in associate limbo, which basically means he'll never be straightened out. The names mentioned in this video were just off the top of my head, and there are many guys who were once associated to another family. And all of those mentioned have been released, traded, or even poached for one reason or another. Sometimes it worked out in a person's favor, but then there are instances where the grass is not always greener on the other side. In some cases, entering a new family leaves you with very few allies, whereas the family you came from, you had more than your share. Having allies in that life is crucial. It's the difference of being in a canoe with paddles and being in a canoe with none. Big difference. But then again, for most people, the changing of families worked out for them. It's the luck of the draw, I guess. But let me add that not all associates who are released or traded become members in a new family. I don't want viewers to be confused. Getting inducted is not for everyone. It's the reason why there's always been more associates than members. I hope you all enjoyed this video and that you all have a great weekend.